Hello, I'm Graeme Park and welcome to another Creative Futures session where we talk to a variety of creative industry professionals in front of an online audience of students from Glyndwr University. Today's guest started at the bottom of the music industry back in the early 1990s before working his way all the way up to become the head of A&M Records and on the way signing acts such as Sophie Ellis-Bextor, Duffy, the Cortinas and more. And then he moved into television, where he now works closely with Simon Cowell on X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, and other shows as well. Please welcome Simon Gavin to today's Creative Futures session. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Graeme. That's a nice introduction.
Yeah, well, now normally I'd have a massive list of questions, but because I've known you for over 30 years, I know exactly what I'm going to ask you, and I know that you'll be pretty good at answering the questions. So, from music industry to television, let's take us all the way back. I mean, I first met you in the early 90s at the Southport Weekender, but when, do you remember? Southport Weekender.
No, if you remember, you weren't there.
Yeah, exactly. But I was introduced to you by a guy called Rob, who'd said, this is Simon, he's going to be doing my club promotions, right? Yep. And that was your first job for Virgin Records, doing the club promotions. And then Rob left you and me together and we hung out and got to know each other. But what were you doing before you started at Virgin? Just a little bit about your background.
Well, I can't remember what year I left school. Many years ago. They still used a blackboard and chalk, so it was quite a while ago. I left school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I got a job in Harrods, which was fun. And I worked there for a few years and I got onto a management training course to train to be a buyer. And I kind of realized after a year or two, it's not really what I wanted to do. A friend of mine moved to New York. So Neil, who you know, who's my brother-in-law, he decided he wanted to go live in New York and get into music. So off he went and we kind of stayed in contact and life sounded quite exciting out there. So I saved up some money, which I thought would last me a couple of months. And I went to New York. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Crashed out on people's sofas, rented a room occasionally, and just kind of like hung out. Anyway, he was working at a management company. So I'd go in every day and just sit there and get people's lunches and answer the phone. And in fact, one day I decorated the office. So I was sent out to get a paintbrush and some paint and I had to decorate the office. And gradually this management company built into quite a big management company. We managed hip hop acts. So Gang Starr, Master Ace, Bobby Condors, Mark the 45 King, all names you've probably never heard of because it was so long ago, but it was a really great time to live in New York. It was like late 80s, 88 to about 91. And then we used to do one-off club nights. We'd find venues like old warehouses, function halls, and we'd move in DJs and we charge everybody $10 at the door. So that's kind of how we made money to start with. And then the management company built and built. I did a world tour. I tour managed Gang Starr for a year, which was exciting. And eventually,
just tell everyone how big Gang Starr were, though, because I mean, I'm familiar. They were massive.
Well, they were kind of at the birth of hip hop. So Guru and Premier. I mean, Guru died a couple of years ago, but Premier's still around making music. And they were kind of part of the pioneering groups of hip hop. So in its early years, and now they're considered kind of, pretty much kind of hip hop royalty, I suppose. Moment of Truth is a great song. You're absolutely right. I've got your messages up here. So,
good man.
Yeah, it is a great song. And they were at the birth. They were part of the formative years of the genre. Anyway, I came back. I wasn't working legally in America, and it's very different to how it is now. I mean, you can't literally stay a day past your stamp day, but I stayed there for about 2 years. Anyway, I came back.
But hang on. You're a young man from Gravesend, right? Yeah. And now you're tour managing Gang Starr.
Yeah.
Was that?
Well, I didn't really know what I was doing. Most of my job was to stop the two of them fighting each other. And also kind of running back from an airport to a hotel in a cab to pick up one of their lost passports. So it really was, you are babysitting really. So
how old are you?
Then I would have been 24, 25.
Okay.
And I loved it. You know, it was kind of like the Wild West. You could, you get to New York, you are who you say you are. There's no, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. If you work hard and, just really kind of take a chance, it was a time where you could really, really do that. And I don't think things are much different now, but, I loved it. It was amazing. I met so many people. It was out of my comfort zone. I didn't really know what I was doing. But it was really good. And then we used to manage producers. And we kind of built this company from the guy who I worked for. He used to wait for his girlfriend to go to work, and then we'd all go in and work out of her kitchen, off her kitchen table. And at the time, they still do it. They do a Music Week directory. Do you see those still? Music Week directories?
Yeah, Music Week directory still exists, yeah.
Back in the 80s, it was about that thick, and now it's like a pamphlet, but it was about that thick. And it would have every single record label. It would have the A&R people, and it would also have their top selling artists on there. So what we would do, we'd divide up a call sheet and we'd ring people, cold call people at record labels. It's kind of how I met Rob, who introduced me to you. Mm-hmm. So you'd phone up and you'd go, hi, my name's Simon Cowell, I'm calling from New York. Well, back then, if you were calling from New York, it was quite a big thing. It was the 80s, people loved to call from New York. And you'd say, I represent a producer called Vaughan Mason, who at the time was like a DJ producer, very, very on the up.
Vaughan Mason died recently. Raise and Bounce Rock Skate Roll, as sampled by De La Soul. Carry on.
There you go, Parky. So, so we managed Vaughan Mason, and he loves your group Soul to Soul. And he'd really love to mix Keep On Moving. And Rob will go, what, amazing, I've had a call from New York. I want to do that. How much is it? And you say, well, it's $5,000. Yeah, okay, I'm up for that. So then we'd sit there and go, right, how do we get in touch with Vaughan Mason? We don't really know Vaughan Mason. So we'd find out where he was DJing. And you'd go to the gig, whether it's like Paradise Garage or wherever it was. You'd go to the gig and you'd say, Vaughan, have you got a minute? Yeah. At the end of the night. And at the end of the night, it would be 5 a.m. So you'd be like that. So at 5 a.m., Vaughan would finish. You go, Vaughan, listen, you don't know me, but a friend of mine who runs this label has got this act. It's called Soul to Soul. The song's called Keep On Moving. They'd love you to remix it. And he'd go, well, I haven't heard it. And he'd go, well, let's hear it. So you play it to him. And he'd say, well, how much do I get? He'd say, well, you get $3,000. So you go, great, I'm in. So, that's how we kind of made money and built the company. Is you sort of just hustle, I suppose.
I was going to say that is classic hustling.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it. It was so good, such good fun.
So you obviously learn. So you're obviously learning a lot as you go along, though, aren't you?
Yeah, you are learning a lot. I mean, mainly how to deal with people. It's such a people business, and I think it's something that the ability to be able to deal with different people on different levels is a real, it's an asset. It's something I think you really need to have. So yeah, that was life in New York, and it was great fun. And I left, and Neil, as you know, stayed there for another 8 years.
Yeah, but this was Empire Management.
This is Empire Management, which then became Ultra Records. So Patrick then did Ultra Records after that, which is a.
But Neil still does Empire Management in London, doesn't he?
Empire Management, yeah.
So okay, so you moved back to the UK.
Yeah, I moved back to the UK, and I didn't want to work in management anymore. So I found myself being offered some jobs because I'd met a lot of people from record labels who came out to New York to our clubs, and also people we used to hustle to get remixes and production work. So when I got back to the UK, I was offered a couple of jobs. One of them was at Virgin Records, and the other one was to be an agent with a guy called David Levy. Do you remember David Levy?
I do, yeah.
Primary Talent, who were a big booking agent at the time. And I didn't really know what a booking agent did. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that, which is a shame really, because they make a lot of money. You could have done that. So I went to work at Virgin Records, and I turned up and I was like, Rob, what is this job? And he said, well, it's club promotion. And I thought, I have no idea what that is. What do we do? He said, well, we get these records, 12-inch vinyl, and you get to know all the DJs, and you get them to play the record, and also, more importantly, to chart it for the Record Mirror Club chart. And I'm like, well, that's a job. You actually pay people to do that. So I took that job, and that's obviously when I met you. And I spent my first 2 years, I suppose, driving around the country, going to clubs, getting records played. I mean, it was good. It was
in a Renault. You drive around in a Renault, wasn't it?
Renault 19, Parky.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, with potpourri. Potpourri. Right, anyway.
I thought you'd bring that up.
Yeah.
So, and that was an amazing time, you know, getting paid for what seemed like a hobby. Well, actually, everything ever since has felt a bit like that, really. But
but at that period, there were many record labels. Not like
yeah,
now, where
yeah,
there's many brands, but only three big companies. Many record labels, and every weekend, most of the club promote your colleagues at different record labels, and there was probably about over 20 club promotion managers like you would get in your company cars or the British Airways shuttle or the train. You'd all come up to Manchester and stay in the most expensive hotel there was
yep,
on expenses, and all come down the Hacienda
yeah.
and get, well, indulge a lot. And you'd all have records under your arm. Parky, can you play this? Parky, can you play this? So here's some records for you. And then just go and party all night. That was your job, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then at the end of the night going, did he play it? And I'm like, I don't know, I didn't hear it. Did he play that record? I'm not sure. And then also getting you guys to chart it was really key.
Yeah.
For the Record Mirror Club and the DMC Club chart, which was just the whole. It was a crazy concept, really. But you know, dance music was, well, it was in its infancy, I suppose, at that point. You know, and it was a really amazing time to be in music. You know, you had record labels, and as you said, there were loads of record labels at that point, 20 or 30 record labels, and you'd have a dance department. There were like 8 of us in this. You know, I was running this department, which was getting dance music played on dance radio and in clubs. That was our job.
But there was more. There was radio stations, like new radio stations like Kiss, which became Galaxy, that were set up for dance. So that must have helped.
It did. And I remember, you know, I'm from Gravesend originally, and Pete Tong is from Gravesend, and I got to know Pete again. So I used to go and sit in on his Radio 1 show and kind of log down all the songs that he was playing. And then as part of the kind of, you know, exchange of help, you know, he plays some of the records. So it was kind of a good thing to do.
Yeah. So here's a question from Tasha. She wants to know, someone who's familiar with networking or hustling to help the outcome of what you do, what are some tips you could give based around this to help get your name out there? Hustling tips.
I'm just reading that again. As someone who's familiar with networking or hustling to help the outcome of what you do, what are some tips you can give based on? Well, that's a really good question. I mean, it really is about getting to know people. It depends what kind of. It actually doesn't really matter what you want to get into, because I imagine all you guys want to be in. Was it music, TV?
Well, we've got music productions, live sound, studio tech. We've got artists, we've got applied artists, we've got graphic designers, we've got photographers, TV, radio, film. It's creative industries in general.
Okay, so what you have to your advantage now, that we didn't, I suppose, at the start, you actually physically go out and meet people to start with, is I would, in whatever area you want to work in, find the companies that you'd really like to work for, or the people you'd really like to meet, and I would email them. I would get in touch with them and explain who you are, what you're doing. Not too long an email. What your interests are. And actually, I find, because I know we do it, if people want to come in and have a chat about, you know, how to get into an industry, how to get into a server, most companies, particularly record labels and TV companies, would meet you. So I would say reach out to as many people as possible, and get people to respond to you, because I think it's a really, you know, such a direct way of meeting people now. Just send them an email, keep it brief. And just explain who you are, what you want, and see if they're up for meeting. I mean,
what about social media?
Social media, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's like obviously the most direct route. So yeah, the whole social media thing's a good one to do as well.
Can I just, do you remember, you said email? Do you remember this, when you and Rob, your desks were facing each other? And you had computers on your desk, and I went in there one day because I actually spent a lot of time just popping in to see you and other people. And I popped in and you said, Parky, quick, look at this. We've got this new electronic mail. And you sent an email to Rob, who was on the desk opposite you. Do you remember that? The first time I ever witnessed an email, blue screen, yellow text.
Yeah.
And look where that's got us now.
Well, Virgin were quite advanced at the time. They used to have a thing called the Raft, which was an internal email system. And everyone had, so this was like 1989, 1990. So everyone had a computer on their desk. they just arrived. It was like what you did, and you emailed people within the company to keep everyone up to speed with whatever you were doing and the projects you were working on. And then there was a bulletin board, a notice board, which is obviously completely abused by everybody the whole time. That was normal. And then when I went to work, well, we'll get to that bit in a minute, but I was obviously at Virgin for a while. But then when I went to work for Polydor, it was like going to the dark ages. I remember walking into the office and saying, "Where's my computer?" And my boss said, "What do you want a computer for? You're an A&R guy."
Wow, and that was mid-90s, wasn't it?
You don't need a computer.
Yeah. Before we go on to you leaving Virgin, though, you did say you turned down the chance to be a booking agent,
Yeah.
right? But because you and Rob knew me quite well. because you know what's coming, don't you? No, because you and Rob knew me very well, and we saw a lot of each other, and you shared an office, and your desks were literally touching each other.
Yeah.
You both said that you would become my booking agents, but that didn't go well, did it?
Not for you. Not for you, it didn't go well. No, we'd find, but you were supposed to be in either Glasgow or London on the same night, which wasn't good for you, Parker.
No, it wasn't.
But I did realise you still owe me money for that.
Do I?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah, about £1,000, I think, for.
Yeah, right.
No, it was bad. We should never have done that.
No, it was all fun at the time. It was the Wild West. So anyway, you went from club promotion. What was your next step?
So I was at Virgin, quite happy. Virgin was an amazing place to work. It was a true independent. Branson still owned it, and it was just an amazing company to work for. They looked after their staff. There seemed to be like a party every night of the week. It was just good fun. They did really have that motto, which is like play hard, work hard. My boss used to say to me, "I don't care where you are, where you've been, what time you get, just come to work, be at work at 10 o'clock the next day. Even if you're asleep at your desk, just get into the office." And it was great. And then I got offered a job by a guy who I met, and I didn't really like him. I got a call from a friend of mine that worked at Polydor Records, and Polydor at the time was part of a company called Polygram, which were Dutch owned. They were owned by Philips, who were the
make toothbrushes.
Yeah, electrical goods, and they owned Polygram. So I got a call from this guy who was a friend of mine that worked at Polydor Records. Now, Polydor Records were possibly the worst record label in the music business at the time. They were putting out karaoke albums and Jason Donovan records to make money. That's what they did. And at Virgin at the time, we were the home of,
Well, you said it's soul to soul.
Soul to soul, but also all of it. Simple Minds, Boy George, Culture Club. Like, it was an amazing record company with a great.
But why Polydor that was the home of the Jam?
Was the home of the Jam.
And some great classic rock bands and stuff.
And that was probably the end of when that was the only time. That's when they ceased to be good. So there was a period about 15 years, 20 years where they were just terrible. Anyway, a friend of mine worked at Polydor, and he phoned me up and he said, the guy I work for really wants to meet you. We want to expand our A&R department. Can you come for a meeting? So I went to meet this guy, and he was marching off 10 yards down the road. So we go to a fish and chip shop around the corner in Hammersmith under the flyover. It was so glamorous. And he was just rude, and he left. And as I left, I said to this guy, I said, "I can't work with this guy. I said, he's not my cup of tea at all." Anyway, this guy turned out to be Lucian Grange, who is now head of basically the world. But so I went back to my office, and I kind of thought about it a bit more. I thought, I don't really have to like the guy to work for him. I've just got to think he's really good and think.
Were you approached to this job?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But why were you approached for it? Because you're just a club promotions guy.
Because I tell you why, because Pete Tong recommended me.
There you go.
And Pete's label, London Records, was part of Polygram.
Yeah. So those who know, Pete Tong resurrected the FFRR brand, or made that brand, and put out loads of massive club tunes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think at the time they wanted to relaunch Polydor, bring some new people in, and he recommended me for the job. So anyway, I took a second meeting with him, and I ended up going to work at Polydor. And at the time, Lucian was head of A&R for the label and general manager. And I thought, I don't like this guy very much, but I think he's a winner, and I think he's going to go somewhere, and I wouldn't mind being part of that And I think I learned something from him. So I went to work at Polydor, and I was there from, 1994 to 2012 within that system, but then it became universal.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I started off at Polydor as a junior A&R guy in dance music. And I signed a load of stuff and none of it worked.
Well, that's some of it did work in clubs, like Renegade Master, for example.
Yeah, yes, kind of one-off.
Kim English.
Yeah, but they weigh that up against the money they pay you and the amount of things that haven't worked.
Yeah, of course.
So, it's a results-based business. And I remember sitting down with my boss, Lucien, and he said to me, look, the things that you're signing, you like them and your friends like them, and they're probably quite visionary. He said, but they're not going to pay your wages for very much longer. Mm-hmm. And he gave me this piece of advice, which I thought was absolutely crazy at the time. He said, I want you to go and sign something you don't like. Mm-hmm. So I like, oh, how does that work? But I kind of knew what he meant. What he meant was there is music to like and music to buy for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then there's music that is going to make money for the company. And that's fundamentally what your job is. And when you first start doing A&R, which is what I did, you want to be visionary and you want to kind of like, creatively change the world musically and blah, blah, blah. And then you realize you work for a corporation and all they care about is the results. So I kind of changed tack a little bit in terms of the things I wanted to sign. And I realized that I needed to do something that was a bit more commercially viable. So I had a meeting with a lawyer one day and I said, I'm looking to sign something. I don't want it to be dance music. I want to do something else. And he played me a song by this guy called Eagle Eye Cherry. Now I knew the last time I met Eagle Eye, he was about 10 years old because I worked with Lana Cherry when I was at Virgin. And I thought, actually, this ticks all my boxes. It's a Cherry who I really like, the family and the creativity. And he played me a song called Save Tonight. And I thought it was all right. I thought it was okay. It's not a bad song. So I went to Stockholm to meet him. And he played me his album. And he was signed to a Swedish label who were already about to put out Save Tonight. And the song I preferred wasn't Save Tonight. It was a different song. But I went to Stockholm and they said, look, we've made this video and we're about to release it. So really, you should put out the same song as us first. Oh, all right then. I didn't really love it. Anyway, I put it out and it was massive. And actually, it turns out the song I really liked wasn't really a hit. So I got really lucky on that first project. And it kind of taught me quite a lot. It did teach me a lot of stuff, which was, you really do have to look at the market as opposed to just look at your personal taste in A&R. It's good to have taste. It's good to have, a musical knowledge, but it's more important, absolutely more important.
So knowing the market, okay, you're talking about music, but that's true of any creative field, really. If you know your market, then you're going to be better prepared to appeal to it and sell to it.
Well, in theory, yeah, but you know what A&R people are like. It's everyone's so opinionated, and what they believe is right, and if any of you guys that are on this call have ever sent anything to a label to listen to, you're relying on their personal opinion. And,
yes.
And actually what you do need to do as an A&R person is have a broader opinion of what would work commercially. And I think there are always, I think in A&R, the whole point is you have
to. Was that Simon Cowell on the phone there?
No, it was Neil, my brother.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In A&R, what you have to do is look at two things. So you've got to decide whether you want to challenge the market with something, which is also crucial, or you want to go with the market and do things that are working at that time. So there are two things you have to weigh up.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we come to your television, your church television, I can see how what you're saying now and talking about is important for what you move to television. But we'll come to that. Tell us some of the other artists you signed while you were at Polydor / Universal.
Okay. So Eagle Eye Cherry, Daniel Bedingfield. I mean, Daniel was an interesting one. Yeah, I met Daniel and I thought this guy is absolutely all over the place. He'd play me a rock song and a ballad and an R&B song and a garage record. And I sat in a room with him. I thought, if I was a music publisher, I would sign you now. But from a record label point of view, I don't know how this is all going to work because it's so across the board musically. And I remember because I live sort of 45 miles from London. And so I do a 2-hour journey every day in the car. And I found myself listening to his demos constantly, which I know probably some of you will find a surprise and also horrific at the same time. But it was quite amazing because one was a rock record, one was a ballad, you know, and I thought, you know what, if I want to listen to this constantly for 2 hours a day for a week, then surely some other people might want to do that. I don't really have weird taste. So I took a chance and I signed him, you know, and it was that was a lesson too, because Daniel made, in my opinion, one of the best garage records ever made in Got to Get Through This.
Yeah.
And then he had this ballad called If You're Not the One, which, I mean, is, you know, hasn't really stood the test of time, but at the time, you know, it's a massive song. And I went to his house and I said, you know, tell me about this ballad. He said, oh, it's not for my album. He said, I've written that for Westlife. I'm going to send that to Simon Cowell. I want Westlife to do that song. And I'm like, Daniel, you can't send that. That's like a copyright song for you. You know, we should put this on your album. We had a massive fight about it. And he was like, you're trying to turn me into Ronan Keating. I'm like, well, you wrote the song. I didn't write the song. You wrote the song. So you should take the benefit of it. And, you know, we did like 4.5-5 million albums on that album. And he did. He would cut across all the genres on one record. And that's an example of not overthinking something as well. And actually just sit there and go, are these songs great? Do you think people will like them? And it was really that decision.
What about Duffy?
Duffy, yeah. So that was when I started A&M. So I can't remember what year that was, 2002 maybe, I can't remember. Mm-hmm. So we just started, I was asked to, so this is what happens. If you go and work at a record label and you do A&R and you start getting really successful, people you work for want you to do something, they want you to do a different job after a while. So they want you to take on more responsibility and do more. So they went, we want you to run A&M Records. Now, if I had my time again, I probably wouldn't do it, because running a record label and being an A&R person are two very different skills. You know, I was sitting in budget meetings and marketing meetings and stuff that doesn't interest me. What really interests me is artists and songs and music. And the job was becoming very detached from the thing that I really liked, that actually ended up getting me that job. So it's a weird thing that happens in the music business. So I started A&M Records and we needed a brand new roster. And we had
because A&M is one of those heritage labels, you know, the Police, Squeeze, Herb Albert,
Carpenters.
Yeah, the Carpenters. And they had a very successful dance label at one point as well.
Yeah,
you're given the task of coming up with a whole new roster.
Yeah. So come up with a new roster. So I met Duffy. She was managed by Jeff and Jeanette, who own Rough Trade Records in West London. And Duffy was one of those, there were 5 songs on the demo. And Mercy wasn't one of them. I'll come to that song in a minute, but there were songs on the demo and I loved it. You know, it really did appeal to the music that I felt we could really do a job on. So we met in a pub in West London and I think we were there for about 4 or 5 hours. And the thing about Duffy is she's amazing. Duffy, like every day is the first day of her life. Like everything's like, it's such a nice headspace to be in, really. And we had a really great kind of 4 or 5 hours. And then everyone else in the music business found out about it. So all the labels were offering money. And Jeanette said to me, look, we really want to come to A&M, but I'm going to have to see everybody because, you know, I wouldn't be doing the right job for my artist as a manager if we didn't entertain other people. But I just want you to know that we really favor A&M. So I kind of relaxed really, and we just waited for her to say, right, I'm ready to make an offer. And honestly, on one project, I've never seen so much go so well so quickly, and none of it to do with me, apart from the fact that, I swapped money for music. So 6 of those songs were on a record. And
this is Warwick Avenue, is it?
Warwick Avenue was on there, Syrup and Honey. There were a bunch of other songs on there, yeah. So we had a meeting together, me, her, Jeanette, and we decided, we knew that there was probably one song missing. It's a classic A&R thing. If anyone becomes an artist or a manager, you'll sit in an A&R meeting with your A&R guy and he'll go, we're one song short, you know. And it's a classic thing. You send them away to do one more song because you might get that little bit of magic you think you're missing. So, and I did believe it. I felt like the record was a bit too matured. It needed kind of a younger launch single. So she said to me, give me 3 weeks and I'll come back with a song. So I was like, okay, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but okay, let's do that. Sure enough, like 3 weeks later, she phoned me up and said, I've got a song, can I come and play it to you? Came in, put the CD in, press play, and Mercy came out. And I just looked at her and said, where did you get this song from? So she said, well, I was buying a flat. I went to look at a flat to buy, and I walked in and there's all this equipment. And I said to the girl who was showing me around, whose is all this? She goes, oh, that's my boyfriend's. He's a producer and a writer. She goes, well, I'm a singer and a writer. So what we're going to do is we're going to work together. That's what we're going to do. And she went round the next night and they wrote Mercy in 2.5 hours. So, wow. And then this is the biggest lesson. One of the biggest lessons I learned as an A&R person is when you sign an artist and you need to work creatively with music producers and writers, you write out a list of people you think you want to work with. And normally it's people that are having hits at that point, or they're about to have hits, or they're people you know can deliver. And the guy that she worked with on Mercy, if I had a list of 20 producer writers to work with, he wouldn't have been 35 on the list. But they came up with the song, and it showed me at the time you can't write anybody off. You know, you can't automatically think in your head, well, that person hasn't had a hit for 10 years, let's not use them. It can literally happen at any point, you know, with any kind of scenario.
Well, this is a good point to bring in 2 questions that I think really fit in with what you just said. First question from Hannah, if you look in your chat, as you've been in the industry for a while, how can you tell stars from the crowd? Hannah says, I understand that doing this job, you'll meet hundreds, maybe thousands of people saying they can bring something to the label, yet when it gets down to it, they're like a rabbit in headlights. So basically she's asking, what makes a person stand out from the crowd?
God, you know what? It's a brilliant question and one of the hardest questions to answer. It really is based on your instinct. Your feeling. Like, I always want to feel like I'm in the presence of somebody, and it doesn't mean about being arrogant or, you know, it's not about that. It's like feeling you're in the presence of someone. You have a feeling about someone. I mean, there's artists that I've met that I pre-signing that I've thought were amazing, but wasn't sure if it was going to work for them. So, I mean, actually, I'm gonna make myself look a proper idiot. But so there's 3 acts that I met after signing Duffy. Like, when I met Duffy in the pub, I'd heard 4 songs. So you know she can sing and you know that she's got a sound. And for me, what it was about was we already had Amy Winehouse was there. And in my mind, there's always 2, in any big explosion of an artist, there are generally 2. So there's a Rolling Stones and there's a Beatles. You know, if you go into like pop in the late 80s, 90s, there's an E17 and there's a Take That. There's an artist that you want to hang out with and go to the pub with, and then there's an artist you could take home to meet your mum and your nan.
Blur and Oasis.
So Blur and Oasis. So there's like a yin and a yang, but they're kind of 2 sides of the same coin. And I always felt Duffy was the other side of the coin from Amy Winehouse. So you're appealing musically and sonically to the same people, but they had different artist propositions. So to answer your question, I feel like you have to feel like you're in the presence of somebody who can deliver what they say. And ultimately, to answer your question, you don't really know. You take a chance, but you kind of hedge your bets a little bit from your experience. So you can say, I've met someone like this before and this happened. And that's not to say that the same thing will happen again, but you know, you have experience of that person, of that type of artist. You know, the 3 acts I met that wanted to sign to A&M after Duffy, one of them was Florence and the Machine. So Florence used to come in our office. The guy I worked with signed her publishing really early on, and she'd come in and hang out. And I just didn't really get a vibe. I didn't really feel much from her. You know, I've not got that right. You know, you can't get it right, is what I'm trying to say. Another one is like Eddie Goulding. She'd come in every once a week and just play songs on the guitar. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's very pleasant, but how are we going to do this? And actually the record she ended up making was very different to what she did when she used to come in and play. And then I suppose the third one was Lana Del Rey. And I met Lana Del Rey and thought, you are an absolute superstar, but I'm not sure as a musician. I always thought she'd be an actress, or, you know, so you can't, you know, you make your choices, you make your decisions, and, you know, hopefully you kind of guess right more often than not.
Okay, so previous to Duffy, you signed Sophie Ellis-Bextor, who went on to great success.
Yeah.
Duffy goes on to be massive.
Yeah.
Presumably, that means as people are now coming to you with acts, so you've probably got more to go through.
Yeah.
Tasha has asked, would you say it's more about who you know? Sometimes everyone can have some talent, but for any artist, what makes them stand out? Is it the talent, or is it something else?
Combination of both. You've got to have you have to have the talent to start with, and then it's about the people you choose to help you, or they choose to help you. So you know, finding a good manager, finding a good lawyer, you know, so much of it comes through that area. You know, getting noticed through social media is really key. But yeah, it is important to surround yourself with good people. The worst thing, I always think, for artists, bad managers are like the curse for me. And there are more bad managers than good managers. I mean, you can probably count good managers on one hand, pretty much.
Do they complicate things, managers?
Well, they can do, but also anyone can be a manager. It's one of the businesses in the whole of the world where you can literally today go, right, I'm a manager. You know, and if you talk a good game, you can go and see someone who has loads of potential and convince them that you are the right person to represent them. And actually, the biggest thing they can take from you as an artist is time. So they could be, you know, faffing about with you for about 3 or 4 years, in which point you've kind of missed your time. You know, well, I can do this for you, I can do that for you, I'm going to do this now, and actually they don't end up doing anything, and they've taken 2 or 3 years of your life away from you. You know, so I feel like that is really key. So yeah, I mean, in a roundabout way, yeah, the people you know are important, and the people you choose to surround yourself with are really key.
Okay, so everything's going well at A&M. You're making money for the company. You're doing your reputation great. And I remember you told me this on the phone yesterday, but I do remember the time when you were on the phone to me going, I don't want to do this anymore. I've had enough. Right? How did you get to that place? Because you're still only how old were you then?
17.
And you probably just in your early 40s then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. I don't know really. You kind of, it gets to be like, it's all.
But hang on, are you? Presumably, you've been very well paid for all this, so you've got the luxury of being able to say, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore."
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a combination of a few things. Is, you know, after Duffy, we did the Cortinas. I mean, when I was at Polydor, I missed out a little bit for you. So when I was head of A&R, we did Snow Patrol, Scissor Sisters, James Morrison. Like, we got on such a big run. And it was great. And then I found myself, so if I go back to the day I realized I didn't really want to do it is when I didn't know what to do creatively with Florence the Machine and with Ellie Goulding and with Lana Del Rey. So these are artists a few years before, I probably would have gone, right, I know what to do. I know where to go and what to do. This is how I think we should do things. And you collaborate with that artist to get to the point they want to get to. But there were 2 things missing. I didn't really know, and I didn't really care enough at that point. I guess it's a bit like writer's block, or, you know, suffering from a little bit of burnout. So I don't really know specifically what it was. It was a general feeling of, I don't really want to do this much longer. And also things were starting to change at that point. You know, you were finding artists and people by going to gigs, and it was a very personal thing. And then music became very much like, you know, what's online. Like MySpace had come round, which was great. It was like the first thing, and Lily Allen came out of it, and that's the other thing. I passed on Lily Allen. So my brother-in-law managed her, so it was it was like the easiest. I could have signed it in a heartbeat, but I just didn't really feel like it. So these things all added up in my head. Like, why am I passing on these artists where really I should just sign them and get on with it? But I just didn't feel like I felt passionate enough.
So what did you do?
Went on holiday for a little while. And then I got offered a role at Sony. So this is like 2012.
Okay. It's only like 9 years ago.
Feels like longer than that.
Hmm.
So about 2012, I wanted to take a break. So I wanted to leave Universal, right, where I wasn't allowed to work anywhere for a year, I think it was, doing
How did that go
A&R.
down with Universal?
It was fine. We came to a really, like, you know what, they were paying money and I wasn't really enjoying it. And we came to a decision where I had a year left of my contract. So they would just, I'd worked there long enough and I'd done enough. And we'd done enough with each other for it to be like an adult conversation of like, look, I don't want to do this. And, you know, go and hire 5 A&R people for what you're paying me. So that's what I would do if I were you. So they honoured the end of my contract. I was taking some time off, and literally the day I left, I was getting phone calls from like, Sony, can you come in and for a cup of tea? And so eventually I did. I went to see Sony, and I said, well, look, I can't actually, I'm not allowed contractually to go and work somewhere else in A&R for 12 months to actually do physical, genuine A&R. So at the time, Nick Gatfield, who ran the company, said, well, I've got an idea. Would you like to get involved in the X Factor? And I said, definitely not. Absolutely not. Do I want to get involved in the X Factor? That is like the Antichrist from where I come from. You know, that's not really about music and about artists. You know, no, definitely not. Well, why don't you? How about you go out to Miami and meet up with Simon Cowell? And I thought, that sounds like a laugh, actually. Yeah, maybe we should do that. So I went to Miami, and X Factor US was happening at the time, and I went to his house, and he was in the pool, and I sat in this burning heat, like, you know, roasting in Miami, and he was swimming away, and we just had a chat and a cup of coffee afterwards, and I left, and he said, well, look, come down to the show. We're filming tomorrow. Come and hang out and see what happens. You know, just, you've got nothing to lose. So I was meant to go for 3 days. I stayed for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what, I found myself in liking it because it was something I didn't know. It was a job I didn't really know how to do. And I thought, that's what I need. I need something new. I need a new challenge. You know, this is exactly what I need. You know, it's not a format I love. You know, it's a format when we were at Universal, we were taught to hate, but mostly because we didn't have it. You know, we didn't have X Factor, and it was a massive, massive success, and it wasn't ours, so we hated it. It's a bit like Liverpool, Man United, or whatever, you know. So anyway, they offered me this job of head of music for the X Factor, which was the thing that was going to kind of take up the 12 months when I could actually start doing A&R again, which deep down I kind of really didn't know I really wanted to do anyway, but I was just going along. I was going with the flow. And so in 2012, I started as the head of music on the X Factor. And I had no clue how to do this job. I didn't know the nuances of it. I didn't know anything about it. And that's what I loved. It was a huge challenge. And in 2012, we had like James Arthur and Ella Henderson. It was probably, apart from 2010 when One Direction came out of the show, it's probably the best year we've had that I was working on the show.
Did it feel a bit like when you started out at Virgin, you didn't know what you were doing? You had to kind of or even at Empire Management, you didn't know what you're doing. You had to work it out.
And I think that's the thing, is dive into things, you know, say yes. And I think it's that thing Richard Branson said, like, you know, if you don't know how to do it, say yes and figure it out. Yeah. Because I think that's a really, you know, in terms of your motivation, in terms of job satisfaction, so crucial, I think.
No, I go along with that. I mean, that's how I became a DJ. That's how I became a radio presenter, and that's how I became a lecturer as well. I went, yeah, I can do that. And then what about astronaut?
Yeah,
I turned that one down.
So 2012, I worked on the show, and going back to that question about somebody asked me about knowing that someone's got that thing. When I met James Arthur, because I hadn't been involved in TV before, I wasn't programmed for the whole sob story. My granddad died, left me this guitar, so I'm writing this song. It really was a purely A&R approach to working with some of these people. And when I met James, so part of my job, well, most of my job on that show is to choose the song with the contestant sometimes, and get the tracks produced. And basically you're making records within the show. And and it's all subjective where you think it's good or not, and sometimes, mostly, it isn't that great. But sometimes you get someone that comes in who is an artist. Like James, for me, was an artist the day I met him. And I tell you why, because normally what happens is you choose a song for someone to sing on the show, they take it off, we do a vocal take with a piano and vocal, then we get the track made with the music producer, then they go and sing it on the show. But James, you'd collaborate with, and you decide on the song together, and he'd work on the arrangement with you. So you kind of knew he was more than just a contestant, but he was the only route he knew how, it's the only route open to him at the time to actually achieve his goal.
So you're basically going back to doing A&R then, aren't you?
It's all A&R, yeah. It's all A&R. It's all songs and singers and music.
But I mean, this is obviously where you're talking about the finalists here, right?
Yeah.
Do you get involved at the very beginning of the show? Because I mean, I'm not a fan of X Factor, you know that, but like a lot of people, I will watch the first few broadcasts with the auditions. Do you get involved in that?
Yeah. So
Why are you laughing?
It's my favorite bit. So we do. So for an X Factor season, that show goes out. I mean, let's face it, it's too long. It goes on forever. Like when you start making that show, everyone's wearing shorts and t-shirts, and then you finish it and you're wearing gloves and a scarf. It's like goes on forever. I mean, it's like literally like the Truman Show. But what you do is you start work really early on it. So you start work in February, and you start the audition and the scouting and the casting process. So my role within that, the reason why Simon wanted to work on those shows is because what he cared the most is getting something out of it that he could sign to his label. And the byproduct of that, of course, is like the judges become famous, and Ryland comes out of the show and is a real character, and all that stuff goes on. But his primary goal for setting up that show was to I'll tell you why he did it. At the time, he explained to me, this is what sold me on it. He did it. He set that show up because the music he was signing as an A&R guy before he became famous, Simon was considered a bit of a kind of, he'd sign the things you would never sign. So Mighty Morphing Power Rangers. Well, guess what? He'd sold about 9 million albums of that. So outsold Miss Dynamite, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, and Daniel Bedingfield put together probably. So he'd do those projects that we all kind of laughed at, but then secretly went, well, I wouldn't mind the royalties on that though. That's really good. And he'd do things like Five and Westlife, and radio was really changing in terms of the things they would play, and they were going very anti-pop music, and it's all he knew. So he decided to set up a TV show to break the acts. So TV became his radio station. So the thought behind it was very different to the reality it became. And I feel like, acts like One Direction came out, which had a GDP of a small country for about 3 years. I mean, it was a phenomenal success. So
you did have a bit of television experience before that, didn't you?
Why are you talking about this, Parky?
You did a show on Channel 4, didn't you? Where you and Alex James and others were judges, a talent show on Channel 4. Just tell us about that. I was running A&M, and we hadn't signed Duffy at that point. I think we just signed the Cortinas. Was the first signing to the label. And David Joseph, who was the chairman of Universal, phoned me up and said, listen, we've got an idea for a TV show, and we need a label basically to facilitate the music for the winner. And we didn't really have much at the time. And I found out about the show. It was going to be about bands and people writing their own songs, and kind of the opposite to an X Factor, really, i.e. not as successful. And then, so he said, so I had a meeting with the production company. And I thought, you know what, this sounds quite good. We'll get involved. It wasn't a fortune in terms of the investment, and who knows what comes out of it. So the next thing I know, this guy who ran the production company said, so you'll be the judge on the show, right? I'm like, no, I'm not going on TV. He went, well, you're the label, you really should be on the show, because otherwise you might not get out of it what you want. So I thought, okay, I'll do it. And it was kind of like, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought it was going to be like one camera, like very low key.
And the first show we shot was at the Lead Mill in Sheffield. And I turned up, and I mean, I literally died. I froze. I died 1,000 deaths. It was like cameras everywhere, lights everywhere. And I said to the guy, I went, well, so where will we be when this is being filmed? They go, right, well, you're going to be up on that riser there on a sofa, and the light's going to be on you, and the camera's going to be, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that's what we did it. I kind of sort of dived into it, but it was fun. I tell you why it was fun. It was fun because it wasn't my job.
Right.
You know, it was a bit of fun to do, and I enjoyed it.
And did you get anything out of it? Did you get any act out of it?
Not really, because it was fundamentally flawed in as much as people don't want to discover their bands and sing a song like on a TV show. And I was so shocked actually when they made a season 2 of it. They came to see me and said, we're going to make a second series. I'm like, why? I mean, people watched it. I was getting like 400, 500,000 on a Sunday. And I suppose to compare to the 18 million of X Factor, but it was fun, you know.
Well, let's come back up to the present day. We'll leave the past story. Well, let's go back to the present day. And X Factor, I understand. It's basically doing A&R, which is what you're very, very good at.
Sorry, can I just answer a question here, Parky?
Yeah.
There's a question here from Deborah Davies.
Yeah.
How important is it to choose the right artwork for a musician's album record, especially now when everything seems to be digital? Also, the record labels most use freelance to produce the art. Right, I'll answer that question because actually, I was like, you must be aware of the rise of vinyl, you know, in terms of its sales. I think last year, record labels had a record year with vinyl sales. So I think it has been less important, but now it's becoming more important because you get the size, you get the scale now of a sleeve. So I think it's still always important to choose the right artwork. Definitely, 100%.
What about Jack's question before then as well? Is it good to get acquainted with people in different industries, not just the one you're focused on?
Yeah,
because although
I mean, if you are focused on one industry, I would try and get to know as many people as well as possible. If that's where you want to go, if you have time to do other industries as well, then by all means. But if you're doing it right, it's a time-consuming thing. So I would say focus on the area you really want to work in because it's always in flux. Like people come and go from jobs, so you might speak to someone one week who's not there in 3 months' time. You've got to do it all again.
I think Jack's television. I think Jack wants to get television. Cool. Well, then, but if you like going back to X Factor, I understand your role there pretty well. It's A&R. You kind of trying to find an artist and develop them and get them released, right? But tell us, what's your role on Britain's Got Talent? Because I mean, it sounds like it's a similar idea.
Well,
get judges choosing the top. Sorry,
we teach dogs to sing.
Yeah. So what do you do on Britain's Got Talent?
So it's a similar scenario. So on Britain's Got Talent, it's the role really is to try and make the music acts the best they can be. I mean, you know, it's a very different type of person that auditions for the Got Talent format to the X Factor format. Normally, I mean, we get a lot of people do it as a bucket list. Like on their bucket list, you kind of get a mum and daughter come in and sing a song, and you're like, okay. And it's just something to do, you know, it's like they just want to do it. So your role really, and you work with different, like, you know, the guy who, Colin Thackeray, the Chelsea pensioner, who sang war songs, you know, all you're there to do really is to help those people do what they do. It's very amateur. And you don't kind of want to work too much with them because you want to keep that element of rawness about them, you know. You really, I mean, outside of probably Susan Boyle, a music act on the Got Talent format doesn't normally go on to kind of, you know, be an artist.
But so it's a similar job but different. What about? But you work on
America's Got Talent.
America's Got Talent as well, don't you? How different is it? Different? Are the Brits
so different?
Kind of, yeah, exactly. I thought so.
I mean,
why
honestly,
different?
I've never ever since 2014, I've never worked with a bad singer on that show. Ever.
Wow.
Like the quality, the level. I mean, it's a bigger country, it's a bigger pond to fish in, but the quality of the singers is just astounding on that show. Unbelievable. Like sometimes just like, I don't even know what to say to you. It's so good. Susan Boyle's a family friend. Brilliant. She's fun. We have artists on that show that come out. We had a singer called Grace Vandervelde, who was about 14 at the time, played the ukulele. She won. And there's no pressure on her to become an artist at 14. So she's been doing acting. She's done a Disney film. And eventually, I think eventually she'll be really successful at something, whether it's music or film. And we have an interest in their career beyond the show.
Well, we're in America there, with America's Got Talent. So you get to travel a lot still in your job. But going back to New York in the late 80s, and I remember when I first went to New York in '89, I used to hang out with Neil in the early 90s. The Americans, they love the Brits, don't they? Do you think that has helped in your career in America, your American part of your career? Because the Americans do love the Brits. The amount of times that I'd be in a bar in New York with you and Neil and a few other Brits, and we'd all just like wind the hell out of the wind up the whoever's.
Well, like pretending to be EMF.
That's what I'm coming to. That story, EMF story.
Yeah, I think it has been true, but it's such a small planet now. I think meeting English people isn't the same as what it was in the 80s in New York. And
British people, Simon.
British people. Sorry, British people. I do consider myself British.
Well, no, because everyone this is a Welsh university, remember?
Yeah, I know. It's good. Duffy's Welsh, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was true. I think now it's not the same. I don't think it's like that now, to be honest. I think it's less of a novelty. When I went to New York in 1988 and you open your mouth in a deli, everyone goes, "Oh my God, and you don't get that anymore because it's everywhere,
Okay, so how has the pandemic affected your job? Because you said earlier February is when you start working on the X Factor, and then you got Britain's Got Talent as well. So presumably there are no X Factors, no Got Talents going on around the world, certainly not here in the UK. So how's that affect your job and the future?
Well, I bought a mountain bike.
Good man.
I go cycling. It's affected it drastically. So when the pandemic hit, so last March, a year ago this week, I was in Los Angeles and we were filming the audition shows for America's Got Talent. And the pandemic was starting to really kick off. So we carried on filming, but we got rid of the audience. We didn't have an audience, which for our shows is the worst thing possible. The audience is 50% of the show. The energy it creates, whether it's a good performance or a bad performance, the energy, Simon in particular feeds off the audience. So you'll often see him looking around to see if people like it, and it feeds into his performance on the show. So we scrapped the audience, and eventually we got to a point where we had to pull the plug on the auditions, and we kind of hoped we had enough, which we did. And then I came back to the UK, and I ended up doing America's Got Talent remotely, which was, it was challenging to say the least. Obviously the different time zones. We had about 25 singers in the show. They all need 3 songs. They all need to be vocal coached. They all need to rehearse the songs. They all need producing. So, to give you an example, on America's Got Talent and on things like the X Factor, we make an album's worth of music a week. And we use world-class producers. We use people who have sold millions of records and won Grammys and Brits to make the music. So we produce an album's worth of tracks a week. So doing that remotely on a different time zone was really, really challenging. So that was hard. I think it impacts the show because the show went out, and Simon calls it, it just looks like a COVID show, which it is. There's no audience. It's not quite right, but you're doing it because you need to deliver the show. Everyone needs to get paid. So yeah, it's a real challenge. And this year for me, you know, we're always in a show cycle. Like the only time I ever have off is at Christmas. I get 2 weeks off at Christmas, and I'm constantly working through the year. So for me, the year's weird, but I'm quite enjoying it.
But so basically, other TV shows have gone ahead. Like for example, Strictly Come Dancing went ahead last year. Are you saying that the reason is the audience? That's why you're not even going to bother?
Yeah, it's the audience, and it's also managing the safety of the contestants. So on the Got Talent show, there's a lot of huge dance troupes, for example. Like keeping people socially distanced, keeping them well, it's too risky. You know, the whole thing got.
And briefly on your boss, Simon Cowell.
Yeah.
The Simon Cowell, who sits on the judges panel on X Factor, how close to the real life Simon Cowell is that, or is it an act?
It's a magnification of his personality. Right. It's like a supersized, not in height, but it's a supersized version of his personality. He's very. I mean, I wouldn't have worked for him as long as I have if he was totally like his TV persona. But he does say what he thinks, and you know where you stand with him. He works harder than anybody I've ever worked for. He's still massively ambitious. We've got 3 new TV formats in the pipeline.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's.
And what can you tell us what they are?
No.
I knew you'd say that.
What Y Factor? Like,
yeah, Y Factor.
Why are you doing it? So he's really loyal and he's so bright. So I always wanted to work for bright people. So whenever I've thought about moving a job or going into work somewhere else, it has to be because the person I'm working for is inspiring, clever, ambitious, and I can learn from still. So I've only ever worked for a handful of people. When I worked at Virgin Records, it was for Ashley Newton and Ray Cooper. And Ashley Newton, there's no reason for anyone to know, he is probably the most successful A&R guy I've ever worked for. He signed all those acts, you know, he signed all the Neneh Cherries, he signed the Spice Girls. You know, this is a guy who taught me that don't get stuck in one genre. I mean, he did Massive Attack, Neneh Cherry, the Spice Girls. Like they don't, you know, A&R people tend to work in one genre, but he taught me don't stick in one genre because when it's not working, you're dead. So I worked for him. And then I went to work for Lucian, who's obviously, you know, now Sir Lucian Grange, running the most successful music company in the world. They're about to float on the stock market at some point for like however many hundreds of billions. He started in A&R, like as a head of A&R. And then Simon Cowell. So I've only really worked for a handful of people, but I've always chosen my bosses wisely.
Have you ever, I mean, what's in the future? Have you ever been tempted to become, you know, go and do your own thing, set up your own company, work for yourself?
I don't know. I you know, it's hard to, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, of course, it's crossed my mind a few times. But
I mean, because of your background, I mean, the bands, the acts you've signed, the people you've worked with, the fact you've crossed over to television to great success. I mean, we're very lucky to have you thinking about it, because I'm sure there are people out there who would pay you handsomely for all the advice and tips you've given. And what you've said is obviously music and television related, but it works across all creative genres. You know, like know your market or try something different or whatever. You're not tempted to go and pass that on for profit?
Well, I do it for profit now. It's
no, but I mean, all for yourself. You're set up on your own.
You know what? If I could, you know what? The hardest thing to do is to frame that all into a business. I think, unless anyone's got any great ideas.
Okay, just quickly before we wrap up, what's your view on how the music industry has changed? Because anyone in the world could wake up in the morning now, have a great idea for a track, make it pretty averagely or badly on their laptop and have it up for sale online by the end of the day, right? That takes the whole A&R process out of releasing music. What's your view on that?
I don't think much. I mean, it's changing the way people discover music from an A&R point of view, but it's no different to someone releasing a white label, Parky. back in the day. You know, you make a track, you press up a few, you put it out.
Yeah, but it's less cost though, isn't there? The thing is
listen,
that's what I'm
absolutely. Sorry, I see what you mean. Absolutely. I think it's, for me, I think it's exciting and amazing that that's happening. From a creative point of view, it's great because you've got no one telling you no. You know, don't make that track, don't do it like this. You can literally do what you think is right and you get on with it. If you take, you know, Billie Eilish, for example, someone who, with her brother, you know, did what they did with no interference. They just did what they wanted to do. And there's a reason why it becomes one of the biggest things in the world, is because no one messed with it. It was their vision. They did it. However, from an A&R point of view, I couldn't think of anything worse than being an A&R guy today.
Well, it's bad enough being a DJ because I get hundreds of records sent me every day.
It's not that, it's the function of the job. So I wander around Sony to annoy people, and you know, I go into RCA or Columbia and the A&R guy is sitting there with headphones on a computer trying to find stuff, algorithms. I don't know, it's like, it's the human element of, you know, labels won't sign stuff, you know, if the algorithms aren't right.
Oh, really?
You know, and it's like, right, what's big on, let's sign what's big on TikTok. Well, I think that's one route, but still there's a human element. Going back to the question is, how do you know if someone's, you know, an artist or whatever, is a general sense of instinct, which I feel is missing because it's all done on data. It's all data.
Yeah, but the thing, the point I was trying to make was, in the record industry's heyday, you wouldn't invest in an artist, and you wouldn't invest money in an artist unless that artist was going to make money. Whereas now, anyone can just put any old rubbish out on their own label, can't they?
That's true to a point. But if you take Duffy, for example, because it was such a hotly contested deal, we didn't have Mercy until I'd signed her. We gave her £750,000 to firms, so she got £1.5 million.
Wow.
Before we even put a record out to find out if we had something that would work, because you take the chance.
Yeah, you take the chance. Yeah,
you take the risk, and my boss would always say to me, you know,
calculated risk though. You
get a certain amount of rolls of the dice in A&R. You know, and if you have too many, it costs too much money, you're out of a job. So you are, and all you're doing is guessing, right? Or wrong.
All right. So I like to ask our guests, what would you, if you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self? What would you tell the young Simon Gavin in Gravesend?
Oh my God. I wish you'd told me you were going to ask this question. I could have thought of something good, Parky. What would I tell him? Because you set out on a journey not knowing where it was going to go, didn't you? Where you were going to end up. Good question. I think, don't take no for an answer, but actually I do that anyway. It's not like, I feel like I adhere to that. And, you know, I've got that, you know, you have that thing where sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. You know, within your job, you've always got someone telling you shouldn't and you can't, and, you know, I'm not sure that's right. And I think it's just back yourself. Back yourself, really back yourself to, if you believe in what you want and how to do it, you're always going to make mistakes, and you just keep going and back yourself. You know, I think it's the thing for sure. I
think that's really good, sound advice, and a good point to wrap things up. And the fact we've got no more questions suggests you've covered everything. So Simon, Gavin, good luck for the future, and hopefully I say hopefully in inverted commas, X Factor and Britain's Got Talent will be back on our TV soon. But thank you very much for joining us.
That's something to look backwards to.
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you, everyone.